I've been framed. Maximus's voice was filled with despair and anger. He was accused of multiple murders, while the real mastermind lurked in the shadows. Chapter 22. Maximus. I brushed a hand down my face and grunted. Papers were spread across my desk in disarray. They were paired with photos and files stacked high. I had done nothing but work my ass off the last few days, carefully trying to piece together the puzzle of the rogue attacks. But I wasn't alone. Evelyn had been tirelessly helping me day in and day out, spending time with Mira and Miles, trying to help us find answers. I looked up, hearing the soft patter of footsteps from outside the door and the sweet smell of roses and fresh cotton. Evelyn. I smiled to myself and walked to the door, hearing a small tap sound. Hi, sweetie. I glowed at her. Opening the door, she smiled up at me, a plate and coffee in hand. My eyes roamed the plates of food greedily, her thoughtfulness always exceeding what I thought was possible. I pecked her lips, my hand gently squeezing her hip, before taking the plate and coffee out of her hands and setting them on my desk. I sat down in my chair, my brain racing as I looked at all the files. I huffed again, running a hand through my hair. How is the progress going? Evelyn's sweet voice asked me. She walked around my desk and stood beside me, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. I reached my arm out, snaking it around her waist and pulling her closer beside me. The reassuring flow of energy at our contact grounded me, the warmth of our bodies' closeness seeming to slow my anxiety. I pointed to a file labeled Francesca H. Evelyn picked it up, casting me a questioning glance as if asking if she could read it. I almost wanted to chuckle at her. She hadn't seemed to realize yet that all I had was hers. We were partners. She deserved to know every inner working of my life. I nodded at her. I watched as her eyes scanned the contents of the file. Eyebrows scrunched. I had read the file over maybe 100 times and knew it like the back of my own hand. A photo of a young Fran was in it, along with a new one. The photo's a contrast between young and old, happy and angry. What do you know about her? Evelyn asked me, gaze still fixated on the file. Memories of my interactions with Fran, the woman who thought me a murderer, flooded my mind, making my blood run cold. We know she believes I am somehow culpable in the death of her family and her Alpha and Luna. I spoke softly. Evelyn broke her gaze away from the file to look at me, the studious expression on her face making way for one of compassion. Her eyes softened and she tenderly reached her fingers out to brush some hair out of my face. Why would she think that? She seemed to whisper. I took in a deep breath and sighed. I was there the night of the fire. But Ev... I paused and looked at her, my body tensing. Ev, I was 6 years old when that fire happened. I had nothing to do with it. She scrunched my eyebrows together in confusion, an adorable expression she often had when she was deep in thought. It's all right, though, I assured her. I gently rubbed her back. The Alpha of Evergreen, the last surviving member of the Oak family, is coming to visit. Hopefully, he can help us find the source of this absurd accusation. She slowly nodded before offering a small smile and kissing my forehead. Then, she leaned her head on top of mine. Yeah, she answered. I'm sure he will help bring us answers. I turned my head to look at her, and she lifted her head, swiveling my chair so I was facing her. I rested my hands on her hips. What about the kids? I asked gently. Anything more useful they've told you? She paused in thought for a moment. Mira still won't tell me more about the bad man, but she did tell me yesterday that her last name was Shia. Lifting a hand to rub my chin, the rough stubble grated against my fingertips, a reminder that I hadn't shaved in a few days. The name Shia sounded familiar. A faint memory filled my brain before drifting away like a balloon. Shia. I repeated the name in hopes of finding the memory. It sounds so familiar, but I couldn't get the memory to resurface. Evelyn shrugged. Could you see if Gamma's Xerxes could look into it? I waved a hand dismissively. No, Gamma's Xerxes doesn't specialize in tracking people down. Connor, on the other hand. I miss Connor. He was my right hand, one of the few people I had ever trusted in my life. Being without him was like being a cripple without a cane. My eyes suddenly felt moist. Why don't I give Maudie a call? I need to talk to her anyway, and she's always with Connor. Evelyn asked gently. I wiped my arm against my eyes. I don't want to bother them, they're going through so much. I began. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's good I check in with her anyway. I won't prod. Only ask for his help if the opportunity presents itself. Evelyn proposed. I moved his mouth to the side, questioning whether I should agree. Connor had only just let his mate, and yet here he was helping her with a loss before their life together had even begun. But I knew the pack needed him. If the opportunity presented itself, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. So I reluctantly nodded. Okay, I agreed. The corners of Evelyn's mouth tugged up and she leaned toward me, kissing my cheek. I'll let you know what's going on after I talk to her. She smiled. Turning to leave, she walked in quick steps towards the door, before pausing. Oh, and Max. Leaning against the doorframe. Yes, Angel. I asked her. I'm going to get coffee with Maggie today if that's okay. My whole body tensed, a sense of panic filling me. Ever since the attacks had started, I worried about nothing else more than Evelyn's safety. She had luckily busied herself with helping me at the pack house the last few days, so I hadn't had to worry much. But the idea of her not being in immediate proximity to me worried me. If something happened, who would protect her? Even the weakest stroke could easily maul her. Still, I couldn't hold her prisoner despite my fears for her safety. Suddenly, an idea struck me. I agreed reluctantly. Yeah, that's okay. But could I have you take someone with you? Evelyn raised her brows. A bodyguard. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She asked pointedly. How about Delta White's mate? I asked with a shrug. You haven't met Tina yet. But she's a high-ranking pack warrior. A high-ranking pack warrior that can protect you from a rogue. Evelyn tensed a bit, hesitation filling her face. I looked at her with pleading eyes, hoping to convey how important it was to me. Her shoulders drooped and she sighed. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I asked, a bit of surprise filling my voice. Yup, just send her over here around 11 o'clock, and she and I will leave together. Evelyn nodded. Okay. Grabbing the phone on my desk to call Tina, I heard Evelyn close the door behind her. The phone rang a few times before I heard a click. Delta White. Yes, Alpha. What do you think your mate would think about going out to coffee with my mate and her friend? I asked him. I heard a slight chuckle in the Delta's voice as if something was amusing. Let me ask her right now, he responded. Over the muffle of the phone, I heard him call out honey. Yeah, hun, a loud southern woman responded. Do you want to go to coffee with the Luna? Oh my goodness gracious. Is that even a question, Matthias? She exclaimed. Yes, yes, she replied. I heard Delta White chuckle. So Alpha? I snorted. Tell her to meet my mate at the pack house at 11. I responded. Sounds good. He chuckled before hanging up the phone. I put the phone down and opened my laptop, pulling up the Werewolf database of the United States. It was a private site only high-level pack members had access to. I hoped I could find the missing children in the database with the last name Shia, or at least their family. Typing away, I browsed through name after name, none matching the description of the children in our care. I was going to expand my search to something broader when the phone rang. Hello, I answered. Alpha Alexander. It's Alpha Oak of the Evergreen Pack. A deep but young voice rang out from the other end. Alpha Oak was one of the only other Alphas I knew who was young. Most were at least 50 years old, with many children. Alpha Oak, on the other hand, was 24, younger than me by a year. As far as I was aware, He was the youngest alpha in North America. Many alphas had an air of superiority to them, which I detested, despite how my own pack members viewed me. But Alpha Oak was down to earth, calm, and close with his pack members. It was likely the result of the trauma of losing his entire family and the majority of his pack at such a young age. The Evergreen Pack had been the third largest pack in the United States before its destruction. Alpha had spent the last 19 years rebuilding it. Oh, Alpha Oak, how can I help you? I know that the last time we spoke, you put emphasis on the urgency of me coming to your pack. I owe you a favor for your help with my pack a few years ago. I wanted to offer to expedite my visit. I wouldn't want to impose, but I can be there as early as today. Today? I asked in surprise. I clicked on my schedule for the day laid out on my laptop. Everything could easily be moved and rearranged. Today would be perfect. When should I expect you? The drive is about 5 hours. He mused. So how is 1 p.m.? Sounds great. I agreed. Wonderful. I will see you then, he said in a kind tone. Hanging up the phone, a feeling of assurance passed through me. With luck, the Alpha could provide answers to the rogue Wolf's strange accusations. Standing outside the pack house, I checked my cufflinks on my suit before standing tall. Delta White and Gamma's Xerxes stood next to me. A black SUV pulled up in front of me, stopping before a man opened the door and stood out. Alpha Oak. I hadn't seen him in a few years, but he looked almost the same. He was a tall man, roughly 6'3" with broad shoulders. He had golden brown hair, pale skin, and a honey-brown beard and mustache. He wore a brown suit and a white shirt. Alpha Alexander. Putting a hand out in greeting, I took his hand in mine, shaking it firmly. A pleasure to have you here. Alpha Oak. I nodded. In case you don't remember, this is my Gamma and Delta. I motioned. He smiled and gave a small nod. Nice to see you again, Gamma's Xerxes and Delta White. Gamma's Xerxes bowed while Delta White allowed a look of surprise to cross his features. Then, he bowed as well. A pleasure, Alpha Oak, Gamma's Xerxes said proudly, holding a fist against his chest. Shall we? Motioning the Alpha towards the door. I think that's a good idea. He nodded, battling the top of his suit as he walked towards the door. I escorted him upstairs to my office, walking into the large mahogany room and motioning him to a chair across from me. He sat down, crossing one of his legs and leaning forward, hands clasped around it. So tell me, Alpha Alexander, how may I assist you? As you know, I began as I took a seat. Nightwind has had an ongoing rogue issue for the past few weeks, which has only increased in frequency as of late. Yes, he nodded, motioning for me to go on. During the last attack, we apprehended a woman who went by the alias Fran, but we have discovered her real name is Francesca Wilder. Alpha Oak's brown eyes widened slightly, a look of shock crossing his features. Fran from my pack. Paling a bit. So you know her? I asked, eyebrows scrunched. Know her? The Alpha asked, mouth almost agape. She was my nanny, an almost surrogate mother. This time my eyes widened. Your nanny? Well, this may be fortuitous after all. Your nanny appears to think I'm to blame for your parents, sister, and Pack's murder. I spoke seriously. The Alpha seemed to almost jump back in his seat in shock. Their murder? He asked, seriously leaning in. Why on earth she blame you? Seeming to be confused. I don't know, but I need your help. I spoke lowly, leaning forward. Whoever is behind this seems to be convincing groups of wolves that I'm to blame for the tragedies that have struck their packs. Alpha Oak took a deep breath in, leaning back in his seat. I noticed a gold ring on his finger, which he messed with in thought. A faint smile passed my lips, the action reminding me of Evelyn. And you are not responsible for these tragedies. Kumwe agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm. The Alpha confirmed, his gaze hardening on me as he asked, I slid out of my chair and leaned forward across my desk, hands placed on both sides. I swear with the moon goddess as my witness, I pronounced, gaze locked with his, I am not responsible. To each Alpha froze for a moment before relaxing and nodding slightly. Take me to her. I nodded in response, motioning for him to follow me. We wound to the halls of the pack house, an intensity growing with each of our steps. The closer we got, the tenser both I and I sensed the Alpha alongside me grew. Turning around a corner, a large silver door came into view. I heard the Alpha intake a sharp breath. I placed my hand on the green scanner, watching as the light passed up and down, scanning my hand. The door beeped and the old, familiar large click sounded. I grabbed the handle of the door, the one part not coated in silver, and opened it. Alpha Oak followed behind me closely. The metallic smell of blood filled my nose and I heard the Alpha growl. It couldn't have been easy for him to face someone who took care of him for so many years as a threat. We walked down the old rickety staircase, each step creaking. Reaching the bottom, our shoes clicked against the cement floor. Back again. Franz spoke in a snarky voice. We passed a few empty cells before coming to hers. She was sitting on the floor with her head down. Her hair looked disheveled, and she was covered in dirt. Her gaze remained glued to the floor. I looked at Alpha Oak, who seemed to have paled. His eyes were wide, the golden brown orbs almost glowing. He inhaled deeply and a shiny film covered his eyes. Franny, he voiced hardly above a whisper. The wolf's head shot up and her eyes widened. Tears filled her blue eyes and she stood up slowly. She reached a hand out before retracting it. Realizing there were silver bars between the melee, she asked, a voice quivering. Yeah, it's me. He smiled solemnly, stepping closer to the cell. Fran's entire demeanor softened as she looked at the boy. Their faces seemed to convey years of love that had never been lost, a sense of familial tie passing between them. I breathed out, a breath I didn't know I was holding, and suddenly her eyes darted to me and grew dark. A cold wall replaced her warm exterior, and she looked malicious. She jumped back from the bar. This is a trick, she screamed, voice shaking while pointing a finger. This is an evil trick. Bring the only person I have left in tormenting me. She clutched her head and sank against the wall, down to the ground, shaking back and forth, sobbing. The Alpha froze. Open the cell. Alpha Oak spoke, entire body rigid. Alpha Oak, I can't open the fucking cell. He turned to me and his eyes looked like pools of lava. A avidity I could only describe as one that might challenge my own filled his demeanor. We stared at each other, a battle of ice and fire in our eyes competing. But something in my heart tugged. Something told me I needed to open the cell. I huffed, walking a few paces from the cell to a keypad. I punched in a code and a cell number and it clicked open. Alpha O crushed into the cell, gathering the old woman into his arms and holding her. "Oh, Franny," he whispered. I waited for the old woman to do something, to attack, but instead, she clung to him and sobbed. "He killed them. Eli," she sobbed. "He killed them. Peter saw him. Peter told me." "You believe Peter, don't you?" she asked him, eyes searching his face. I watched a look pass on the Alpha's face, a sudden look of indignation. He locked his gaze with mine. A look that told me something was wrong and we would discuss it later. Then, he turned back and pretended to go along with what she said. "I know, Franny. I know." He consoled her. "I'm taking care of it, okay? I'm taking care of it. And no, you don't understand," Fran said, sitting up frantically and gripping the collar of Alpha Oak's shirt. I stepped forward and he shot me a look saying, "Don't you dare." I took a few steps back, realizing they might need a moment alone. I suddenly thought of Evelyn, a sense of worry filling me. I realized I could mind-link her quickly and check in to placate my fear. "Hey Eve, are you on your way back?" I mind-linked. I tried not to let my worry slip through the link. "Yup, we are in the car and 5 minutes away." Her sweet voice rang through my head, feelings of warmth and happiness seeping through the mate bond. "Good. There is someone important I want you to meet. Alpha Evergreen is here already, she asked in surprise. I chuckled at my mate's foresight. I was surprised myself. But he owes me a favor. He expedited his trip. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Well, I will see you soon. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Love you. I told her. Love you too, she said sweetly. And the background I heard Fran repeating over, and for you don't understand while wailing. What don't I understand, Franny? Alpha Oak asked. They have her, she whispered. She looked at me with a wild gaze, strangely full of fear for a woman who had held such a fortified exterior for so long. He has her. Her voice shook. Who does he have? Alpha Oak asked. Fran looked away from him, seeming to avoid the question, her mind in a different place. I should have never left her with them. If she hadn't been in their care, this would have never happened. A human family would have been better, but that's not what Chloe wanted. Oh, I shouldn't have listened to Chloe. I shouldn't have listened. He would have never gotten his claws on her. Chloe Oak was Alpha Oak's mother. Fran, what are you saying? Or did Mom ask you to leave? The Alpha asked. The woman stayed silent, and Alpha Oak shook his head, a frustrated look passing his features. He slowly stood up. He gave me a nod that said we should go, and I nodded back. He exited the cell quickly, closing it behind him carefully. Where are you going? She cried out. Don't leave me, Eli, she cried as we walked up the stairs. Don't leave. The door loudly shut behind us. We sat across from each other silently in my office. Alpha Alexander, Alpha Oak began. Call me Maximus, I said with a half smile. Then, call me Eli, the Alpha responded with a grim smile. Maximus, you have a larger problem on your hands than you think. I leaned forward in my seat. What are you talking about? The Peter, Fran referenced. If he is behind this, it can only mean horrible things for your pack. Why, what do you mean? Before my family passed in the fire, Peter Melrose had challenged my father as Alpha. I believe it's why your father was visiting in the first place. Peter was a highly manipulative wolf who convinced half the pack to rise up with him. He was very charismatic and seemed to have some sort of tactic of hypnosis where he demonstrated authority almost to the extent of an alpha. He said there were two young wolves with Fran. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wolves not from my pack. That's correct. What was their last name? I began. Eli sat back and took a deep breath. It I feared. He began. She is the last name of a beta family that was recently murdered in a pack in Canada. I felt my heart drop both for the children and in sudden fear of the unknown. Suddenly, their absence from the database made sense. Maximus, I think Peter is trying to dismantle packs and put the blame on you. Chapter 23, Evelyn Max. I called walking into the pack house with a bright smile. Tina and Maggie walked in behind me. I began to shirk my jacket when a pack member came up behind me and grabbed it. Oh, you don't have to, I began to say. I insist. Luna, the young wolf said. He bowed his head and took it to the coat room. I heard a small laugh behind me and a delicate hand was placed on my shoulder. You'll have to get used to it eventually. Luna. Tina smiled and winked at me. I sagged my shoulders, playfully rolling my eyes. I don't know if I ever will. I laughed. Yet, my words held the smallest twinge of truth in them, my secret insecurity surfacing. Oh, you will? Tina assured with a reassuring smile. But despite it, my stomach churned ever so slightly, the prickly sensation of anxiety giving me goosebumps. For a moment, I found myself perplexed by the anxiety I was feeling. It seemed like it was mine and yet a foreign entity all at the same time. My brain flickered to Maximus and it was only then I realized he was missing from the front of the pack house. Is something wrong? Evelyn. Maggie's soft voice rang out behind me. I was snapped from my thoughts and turned to look at both of my friends. with a smile. Oh, everything's fine. I just thought Maximus would be down here. But it's okay. I'm sure he's simply preoccupied. I waved a hand in the air dismissively. I was sure he and Alpha Oak were simply discussing some of the recent pack issues together. It would explain the anxiety. I had such a good day with both of you guys. I gleamed. I stepped forward and gave them each a large hug. I had so much fun with you too. Maggie agreed, pulling away. We should do this again sometime. Tina smiled. We should. I agreed, practically melting at the sweet new friendships I was being enveloped in. I'll talk to Maximus first and see what our plans for the week are. And I'll let you guys know when I'm next available. Sounds perfect. Maggie nodded. Absolutely splendid. Tina agreed, her southern accent ringing around the latter turn. I'll see you guys soon. I waved at them. A smile wider than I felt I'd had all week spreading across my face. See you, they said at the same time. They looked at each other and burst into a fit of laughter at their jinx, then waved at me as they walked through the pack house doors. I laughed and then turned towards the stairs, deciding I would go and find Maximus myself. Walking up the 2 flights of stairs, I found myself feeling a bit weak. It was true. It was much more exertion than I was used to, but the past few days at the pack house the climb had felt easier and easier. I pressed a hand to my forehead, inhaling deeply before deciding to shake it off and press forward. I called out, knocking on the office door. The door swung open and I began to step in with a smile when I realized the man in front of me was not Maximus. A tall man, who appeared to be in his early to mid-20s, stood in front of me. He had golden brown hair, but had a slight wave to it, and a mustache and beard. He stared at me with a measured gaze. "Hey, Angel. Come in." Maximus beckoned me. I smiled softly at the man before stepping past him and into the office. I quickly found myself next to Maximus, his arm linked around my waist, and I noticed the man give me a once-over. His gaze seemed more curious than predatory, but that didn't stop Maximus from pulling me closer. "Alpha Oak," Maximus began, his tone a bit serious. "This is my mate Evelyn. Nice to meet you." I moved to step forward and shake his hand, but Maximus held me tight. I found myself flailing ever so slightly and then trying to laugh it off. Casting Max a questioning glance, Alpha Oak seemingly shook his head ever so slightly, an apologetic look crossing his face along with a small smile. "I'm sorry." He chuckled and shook his head. "But have we met before?" I scrunched my brows, his face holding almost no familiarity except the feeling I had perhaps, met someone who looked similar to him before. "I don't think so." I trailed off. He said, his gaze locked on me. "Perhaps you've met in passing," Maximus suggested. "Evelyn's father is Alpha Smith of the Ice Valley Pack." "I've never met with Alpha Smith, but maybe you're right and we have met in passing." Alpha Oak politely nodded. His posture remained stiff though, the question in his mind remaining unanswered. "Whatever the case, it's nice to meet you. Even if it is again." "The same to you." He nodded. "Well," Maximus began, "you've been of incredible help, Alpha Oak. I think I will fill my Luna in on what we have discussed and we can reconvene. I'm sure you're tired from traveling all day." "Sounds good," the Alpha responded, tipping his head in Maximus' direction. His eyes remained trained on me, his brows ever so slightly furrowed. He left the office, and instantly Maximus pulled me into his lap, burrowing his head in my neck. What I laughed at his seeming jealousy. "I missed you too, Max." He pulled away, eyes piercing me with their intensity. The air seemed to change as I got the feeling this wasn't about the look the other Alpha had given me, but rather what he has discussed with my mate beforehand. "Maximus?" I asked him, my hand reaching out to caress his jaw. He placed his hand atop mine, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. When he opened them, they swam with tears. "Oh, Max," I whispered. "What's going on?" "I think I'm being framed, Ev." "I think I've been framed for years without even fully realizing it." "What?" I breathed out. This man, Peter, he, and then, and Charlie. Oh my goodness, Charlie. This whole time. If only I had known. He began to sob into my shoulder. The kind of sob that bellows out almost into a wail, like waves of emotion crashing against a shore. Each cry broke into an explosion of might. "Sheh," I whispered, pulling his face close to my chest. I wrapped my arms around his neck, holding his head with my hands, gently swaying and caressing him. "Sheh." I hushed. I whispered sweet words of condolence into his ears, trying my very best to comfort him. "It's okay, honey. It's not your fault. You didn't know." I held him until his breathing slowed from a wail to a ragged inhale. "Evelyn," he gently whispered. "Yes, my love," I whispered, finding his eyes as he pulled his head from the crook in my neck. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for letting me." I smiled gently. I took his face in my hands and pressed a soft kiss to his lips. It was tender and delicate, like brushing your fingers against a rose petal, sweet and soft to the touch. Pulling away, I felt like my eyes had turned to pools of honey, enumerated by the sight of my sweet mate. He was broken and beautiful and loving and kind. I felt a depth of love for him blossom in my chest like never before, and it felt like a flower blooming for the very first time. A strange sensation filled me as a flow of warmth spread through my chest. It was like a hug of emotion of the tenderest kind, and looking into Max's eyes, I had no doubt it was a reciprocation of love. I closed my eyes, allowing our foreheads to meet one another. I allowed myself to simply bask in the moment, the feeling too special to ever allow to fade. "Dinner?" I asked Maximus. He had just explained to me we'd be hosting a dinner in an hour with all of our pack members to welcome Alpha Oak and discuss the pack issues. "I'm sorry to spring this on you. I know it's a bit last minute, but it's normal procedure to throw a hosted dinner when an Alpha visits to welcome them." My mind flipped to all the dinners I had participated in over the years at my home, completely oblivious to the fact they were werewolf meetings and part of some ancient protocol. It almost made me laugh. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." "I understand." I stepped on my tiptoes and wrapped my arms around his neck, and kissed his cheek. "So I have to dress up for this kind of thing, or?" Wrapping his arms around my waist and shaking his head. "Something nice, but nothing crazy. And luckily for you, you look nice in anything." "Oh," I giggled. "Anything?" "And?" He nodded. "Someone is quite the flatterer. I guess we will have to put that to the test." His brows narrowed and a smirk played on his face. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm wearing a trash bag to dinner," I announced. "A trash bag?" He stifled a laugh. "What?" I asked in faux shock. "You think I wouldn't look good in a trash bag?" Oh. He laughed. "I didn't say that." I fake glared. "But you thought it." I called away from his arms and pointed an accusatory finger his way. He put a hand over his mouth and dropped his jaw, trying to conceal the chuckle filling his belly. No response. ITSKD. "So you don't think I would be beautiful in anything?" I smiled victoriously. No, his eyes widened. "No, I didn't say that." He again held back a laugh. "Oh no. I've caught on to you, mister," I declared with a laugh. Max stepped forward a few paces, and I back up, wagging my finger at him. "You caught on to me?" He asked, a smirk playing on his lips. "Yes," I laughed. I nodded my head and crossed my arms. "Yes, I have." "Well, if that's the case." He trailed off. "It's my turn to catch you now." I laughed, turning around and starting to run away from him. He chased me out the door of our room and down the hall. I squealed and laughed as he chased me, and he let out his own hearty laugh. However, a few paces into running, I stopped, suddenly feeling out of breath. I placed a hand on my chest to lean forward. "I got you." He laughed, wrapping me in his arms and lifting me off the ground. "Max," I said softly. The laughter had left my voice. He froze, instantly putting me down. and turning me around to face him. His hands came to both sides of my face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Never mind, it's nothing." I waved a hand in front of my face. "Are you sure?" He asked gently. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." I shook my head again. I must have just tired myself out from being out all day. "Okay." He nodded, not looking entirely convinced. "Let's go get ready then." I nodded, feigning a smile as we slowly walked back to our room. But I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach which screamed to me that something was wrong. "So Alpha Oak, how was the trip from the Evergreen Pack to here?" "Maximus, Alpha Oak, Gamma's Xerxes, Delta White." And I sat around a large dining table that I hadn't known existed in the pack house. It was located in a grand dining room with ornate wooden carvings on the walls, full of etchings of humans and wolves, moons and stars. The ceiling was painted in a way that reflected the starry night sky, making you feel as though you were staring into the eye of the galaxy. It was good. Only a few hours. He smiled gently. He sat straight across from me, I to Maximus left and him to Maximus right. His gaze paused on my face for a moment, a behavior I still found strange, before Maximus let out the undertone of a growl. I reached a hand out underneath the table, squeezing Max's hand. I saw a tiny grin spread on his face which he tried to hide at the action. The Alpha suddenly looked a bit uncomfortable and he cleared his throat. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." It's hard being away from my mate. My brows raised. "Oh, you have a mate?" I smiled brightly. "Tell us about her. What is her name?" He smiled softly, looking down at his plate. "Her name is Isabel. We met when I was 10 and she was 9. I was still processing my family's passing." He grew quiet. "Izzy lost her family only a year before we met and she understood what I was going through. She has one of the largest hearts of anyone I've ever met." His voice cracked and he looked up at us. "She was the one that urged me to help you more than anyone. She and I both know the pain of losing family. We don't want anyone in your pack." He looked around the table. "To experience the same thing." My eyes filled with tears and I found myself reaching for a napkin to dab them away. His words struck a chord with me. This pack had become my family in only a few mere weeks. Looking down the table at Tina, a girl I had only just met today and yet knew would be a lifelong friend. And Maximus, my sweet mate who had become my entire life. I couldn't imagine losing anyone there. Maximus reached out a hand and clapped Alpha Oak's shoulder. "Thank you for helping us, Alpha Oak." He spoke with sincerity. The Alpha nodded and gave a gentle smile. "Let's not let the food get cold." Maximus smiled at the group at the table. "Let's eat." Everyone smiled and began to chat amongst themselves, the sound almost like the swarm of a beehive. Looking down at my food, I suddenly felt a bit queasy. I held a hand to my temple and closed my eyes, rubbing it for a second. However, the nausea only came on stronger, like a sucker punch in the gut. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" Maximus asked me softly. I responded. My mouth didn't seem to be cooperating, as if stuck with taffy. I was so nauseous I was sure if I opened my mouth I would throw up the contents of my stomach. Max asked again, his voice growing a bit louder this time. He placed a hand on my shoulder. I opened my eyes and looked at him, taking a deep breath, ready to force myself to speak, when suddenly I remembered I could mind link him. "I feel like I'm going to hell." I mind linked. "Hey, come here." Max stood up and everyone grew quiet. He looked around at everyone, with a fake smile. "Please excuse us. Evelyn is not feeling well. Enjoy dinner." The second he uttered that, he picked me up from my seat and cradled me in his arms, rushing upstairs. The world passed in a blur and suddenly I saw our bedroom door flying open as he moved the cover and laid me down in bed. He reached a hand out to feel my forehead. "You don't have a temperature, which is good." His brows narrowed in concern as I groaned. "Oh, I'm so sorry, honey. What can I do for you?" He knelt beside the bed, Can I get you some water? Some tea? Maybe soup? Medicine? I cracked a smile through my sickness at his sweetness. I paused, catching my breath. I think I'm just going to try and sleep it off. Okay. Ev, he whispered. He stood and pressed a kiss to my forehead. He pulled the cover over me before going and turning the light off. I felt the bed dip and I turned to him with a groan. Why aren't you going back? Guest. Important. I whimpered out. I felt his arms pull me into his chest and he tucked my head under his chin. The most important place for me to be will always be with you, he whispered. I cracked a smile, closing my eyes and humming in response. I allowed sleep to envelop me, knowing my sweet mate would keep me safe. If only I knew he couldn't keep me safe from what was coming. Chapter 24, Maximus Gas. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Thrashing. I shot up in bed, eyes scanning the room. What is going on? You ate, huh? Shaky, rattled breathing broke out beside me. I looked at Evelyn's sleeping form with wide eyes. She was shakily gasping in her sleeping like anything I had ever heard from her. I reached out a hand to shake her awake, but the second my hand came into contact with her skin, I flinched away, scorching hot. Her skin was searing in temperature. Evelyn. Reaching out again to shake her awake. She didn't respond, only continued to turn side to side with deathly sounding breaths. Evelyn. I shouted, shaking her harder this time. I realized her skin was drenched in sweat. I jumped out of bed to turn the light on, rushing over to her side of the bed. Her entire body was rattling, her skin pale and yet scorching red all over, all while she sounded as if she was suffocating. My stomach dropped, a fear overtaking me that I hadn't felt since the night she fell beneath the ice. Except this time, I was more scared because I had no idea what was going on. The door swung open and Gamma's Xerxes stood their eyes wide and only at a pair of sweatpants. Alpha, what? Get drive. Carson? Immediately. The Gamma's head hardly bobbed as he took off in a sprint. I ran into the bathroom, grabbing towels and filling the tub with cold water. I rushed back, to the bedroom, grabbing Evelyn and putting her into the tub. If I couldn't get the temperature down. No, I couldn't think that way. Standing up, I rushed out of the bathroom, ready to go grab ice from downstairs when Alpha Oak stood in the doorway. What's going on, Alpha Alexander? Tone tense and concerned. Evelyn, I need ice. I breathed out. Frustrated, he was blocking my path. I've got it. The Alpha rushed out. Stay with your mate. He motioned me to stay and then flew down the hall. I ran back into the bathroom, kneeling by the bathtub, feeling Evelyn's forehead. Ev, I whispered. Ev, you have to stay with me. You have to. I can't lose you two. I can't. Evelyn, you're the only good thing I've had in my entire existence. You are the only thing that is precious to me. I see, can't I? Began to sob into my hand, as if my palm could barricade my pain and stop the floodgates. Fast footsteps. Gasping. Not Evelyn. No, a different kind of gasp. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Alpha Oak gasped, handing me a bag of ice. He held another one in his hands and began to open it. I followed suit. We dumped them into the tub together. I inhaled a shaky breath, looking at Evelyn's helpless and lifeless-looking form. The only consolation I garnered was from the loud rickety breaths that she inhaled and exhaled. I knelt beside the tub, grabbing Evelyn's hand and caressing it with my thumb. I could feel her pulse beneath my palm, slow and unsteady. My mind felt like it was fading, they're making me retreat. I felt like time was passing painfully slowly and silently. The only sound my mind could hear was her breathing. I was so focused I hardly heard the 2 new sets of footsteps entering the bathroom. What's going on, Alpha? A deep voice rung out, I recognized as Drive. Carson. It was old and weary, weathered by the years. I don't know. She was recroning earlier. And then, dinner, she felt nauseous. But she didn't have a temperature. My voice felt strained. I checked she was okay, and then this I don't know what I did wrong. I choked up. I turned and looked at the doctor with tears in my eyes. He was in his late 60s, with grey hair and a face weathered by the years. He was short with a stout figure and a face that wrinkled around his mouth and eyes from years of soft smiling. He held his medical bag in one hand. You did nothing wrong. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The old gentleman gently clasped a hand on my shoulder. But I need to check her out without distractions. I shot up at his words. You want me to leave? I bellowed. Evelyn winced at the sound, and I immediately regretted it. Alpha Alexander. Alpha Oak spoke gently. He walked up to me and gently grasped my forearm. Your mate needs to be checked out by the doctor. I understand how you feel. I would feel the same way with my Izzy. But he paused and looked into my eyes intently. Evelyn needs to be checked out immediately. Let the doctor help her. His gaze was firm and kind. Something that settled my inner rustling. I trusted him. For whatever reason, I trusted him. I gently nodded, relenting and leaving the room, followed by Alpha Oak and Gamma Xerxes. From outside of the room I could hear the doctor rustling through his bag and pulling items out. Evelyn continued wheezing, and it took everything in me not to run into the room and scoop her into my arms, hoping I could somehow contain her illness. A sharp intake of breath inside the bathroom sent me running inside, fear taking over. The Alpha and my Gamma came running in behind me. What's wrong? I practically yelled at the doctor. He turned to me slowly, his eyes ever so slightly wide-drive. Carson was known for his calm demeanor, yet his expression said anything but that. If anything, he looked panicked. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I don't know how to say this. He stuttered. I narrowed my brows and crossed my arms, casting a glance towards Gamma Xerxes and Alpha Oak, who appeared equally concerned. What do you mean? I felt exasperated. What is going on with my mate? The doctor gulped. You marked her? Yes, he asked. Yes, I answered, curious as to where he was going with this. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Your mate appears to be an occult attune. You activated her gene. I felt the blood draining from my face, my bones feeling as cold as the winter wind. Occult attunes, an incredibly rare group of individuals who descended from humans and werewolves. They were named that from the Latin word hidden because they were completely human, except for an inactivated werewolf gene lurking in their blood. Occult attunes were rarely even discovered for being so unless a person was tested for it because they smelled, looked, and had all characteristics of human. It was only in the rare case of a scratch. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. From a werewolf in which the gene was activated, it would cause them to shift for the first time, completely unprepared. It was well known that the survival rate of someone with the occult attune's gene that had been activated was incredibly low from the stress, trauma, and shock of its suddenly happening. I killed my mate. I had no idea, but I did it. It seems I always somehow do it. I killed her like I killed everyone else I have ever cared about. She's going to die, and it's my fault. I began to see black dots clog my vision as a feeling of extreme illness took over me. I started to stumble backwards as I uttered, "Oh my goddess. I killed her. Whoa, whoa." Gamma Xerxes placed a strong hand on my shoulder. I inhaled a sharp breath, feeling as if I was dying. Alpha Alexander. He said my name firmly, but I continued to feel like a bullet had run out by my ears. Sound seemed muted. Maximus. The Alpha stepped in, grabbing my shoulders and roaring in my ears. He shook me with foreskin. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You can help her, Maximus. You can guide her through the shifting process. Help her. And suddenly, my senses were back. Sound filled my ears and I heard my mates wincing. I noticed how her fingertips had sharpened and on the way her back bent in pain. I sharply nodded at the alpha. In one large stride, I was by the tub and picking my mate up out of the freezing water. Her skin was still burning hot against my fingertips. She groaned as I carried her. Out the door. Down the hall. Down the steps. Out the door I went. I entered the freezing Alaskan air and walked into the woods. Evelyn in my arms. Coming into a clearing, I laid her on the snow. Evelyn. I whispered her name and pushed hair back from her forehead. Evelyn, my love. I need you to listen. I need you to listen, Evelyn. I know you feel a painful pressing on your conscience and like your body is snapping in half. Evelyn, you have to stop fighting the contortions. You have to stop fighting the migraine. Let it in. I whispered. Evelyn groaned and shook her head. Evelyn. I raised my voice. Evelyn, you have to listen to me. You will not survive if you don't accept this. I know you are in pain, but Evelyn, it's only painful once. It's only just this once. One moment of pain is worth a lifetime of living. She lay silent for a moment except the gasps. And then her eyes cracked open to look at me. They were filled with tears and I reached a thumb out to wipe them and caress her face. I miss Essie, kid. She whimpered out. I know, love. I know. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilbe. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Tears seemed to waterfall down my face. But please, Evelyn, please survive. I love you too much to lose you. I couldn't survive it. I couldn't bear it. Evelyn, your S, so P, be precious T to M, me. I choked out. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead against hers and closed my eyes. Even if she accepted the shift, she might not survive. Even if she went through extreme pain, I might not still have her. I could lose her at any moment, and I was powerless to stop it. I felt like I was drowning, and yet I was watching her drown. Evelyn, I whispered. I love you. I pressed a kiss to her lips. Soft, slow, and painful. Each moment of my lips caressing hers was one more moment to say goodbye, and yet one moment potentially risking her life. I pulled myself away with what felt like the strength of 1,000 men. Ev, please shift, I begged. Chapter 25, Evelyn. My entire body writhed in pain. My skull pounding as if struck multiple times by a hammer. My throat felt as dry and great white as a sandy plain. I tried to collect my thoughts, but they seemed to be blurred. Time standing still and yet melting together. What had happened? I questioned myself. I dove into the confines of my mind, perplexed as to what had led me to such a state. Memories of a body flooded and heated, then surrounded by an icy abyss came to mind. But all in flashes. I remember seeing the night sky with the stars twinkling brightly above my head and Max pressing a kiss to my lips. The salty taste of tears passed through them. He was crying. Why was Max crying? I felt confused as his words faded in undoubt. In undoubt. My head throbbed to the point all I heard was ringing in my ears. What was it he was saying? Evelyn. A cool hand pressed against my temple. Evelyn. Listen. I need. Listen, Evelyn. A painful pressing on you. Body is snapping. Earth. Stop fighting, you have. Stop fighting. Let it in. He begged. He sounded like he was in so much despair. It echoed like a cavern. I wanted to reach out and touch him, to comfort him. But what he was saying didn't make sense. I was in pain. Why would I stop fighting? I was sick, wasn't I? Didn't I need to fight the infection? I shook my head at him as much as I could and groaned. Pain shot through my body again, only hotter this time, as if my bones were metal rods being heated in a furnace. Evelyn. My blood ran cold. Something was wrong. I had to fight through the haze of my mind and listen. I had to listen to what he was saying. Evelyn, you have. Listen to me. You will not survive. Accept this. I know you are in pain. It's painful once. This once. Moment of pain. A lifetime of living. I didn't know what to do. Accept the pain. My mind raced and I fought against the horrible churning feeling inside me before cracking my eyes barely open. Tears ran down my face. So painful. So painful. I was in so much pain. But I trusted Maximus. I trusted him with my life. Maximus' icy eyes were full of tears once again, and he looked as if he was the one writhing in pain. Please, Evelyn. He begged. Please survive. I love you too much to lose you. I couldn't survive it. I couldn't bear it. Evelyn. Your so precious tea to end me. I needed to live. I needed to live for life for Max. I closed my eyes and he pressed his forehead against mine. Evelyn. I love you. He pressed a gentle kiss to my lips and uttered something I hardly heard. I relaxed my entire body, allowing the pain to consume me. A fire burned over my entire body and I felt as if my stomach and bones were being broken over. Blazing heat. So hot my skin felt like it was melting off. Pain like 1,000 needles were coating my body and pricking my skin filled me. The pain was so intense. I felt my consciousness fading. Darkness. What had happened? All I could see was black. So much black. Had I lost vision? Died? No, I couldn't be dead. I couldn't be dead because a strong smell filled the air. The smell of pine. The smell was almost overwhelming, but I welcomed it because it smelled like home. It smelled like Maximus. It was as if Maximus' smell had been enveloped into a perfume bottle and sprayed all over the place. It was strange, and I had an even stranger desire to press towards it. I tried to stand and my legs felt weak. It was as if I had never used them before and was taking first steps like a newborn baby. Wait. My legs. I felt pressure on the surfaces of my body. Not just one. I cracked open my eyes and a furry thing was sticking at the end of my nose. I raised my hand to wipe it away, and my hand was not my hand. No, it was a paw. No. Panic set in as I looked down at my body and realized I was not. I was not a human. I was a wolf. I started inhaling quickly through my nostrils, wanting to cry out and yet stay silent at the same time. I was in the middle of a clearing somewhere in the forest and I was a wolf. It couldn't be possible. It wasn't. Yet here I was. Hey, a velvety voice rang out loudly into my ears. I jumped and then got in a pouncing position, baring my teeth and growling. Oh my. It was unnatural for me. Whoa. Ev? A caramel hand stuck out and immediately recognized mate. Did I just think mate? The realization was strange. A weird urgency to be near him filled me and a weird sense I wanted to see his wolf form. Is this what Maximus had meant when he explained the presence of his wolf? It was as if I was driven by a primal side, a side that was only driven by instinct. Eat clay. Family. Protect. I sat down on my haunches. A strange thought. And laid down on my belly to show I didn't see Max as a threat. I watched him crack a smile. Okay, Evelyn. I'm going to step right over there. He spoke and I growled. I didn't want him out of sight. Hey, I know. I'm just going to be 2 seconds and then I'm going to come out in my wolf form, okay? I sighed, relenting. Plus, a small part of me wanted to see him in his wolf form. Maximus stepped out of the clearing into the forest and I heard the strange sound of cracking followed by rustling. His scent grew stronger. I looked around me trying to see him when suddenly he emerged. Wow, he is beautiful. His black coat was shiny and brilliant, and he looked strong. As he got nearer, I realized just how massive he was for a wolf. He was almost 2 times my size. He approached me in slow strides as if letting me take him in and also allowing him to do the same. As he approached, he inhaled a deep breath and his eyes seemed to light up. Stepping towards me, he nuzzled my neck with his head, almost wrapping it around me. Then, he licked the sides of my head. I felt a weird pressing sensation in my mind, and suddenly I realized what it was. Hi, Ev. His sweet voice echoed in my mind. Hi, Max. I mentally smiled. I was so worried about you, Evelyn. So worried. But you are so strong. You survived. I'm so proud of you. I love you, Maximus. I love you so much. Evelyn, do you want to shift back? Will it be painful? I wondered. Just a tiny bit, but not nearly as bad as what you just went through. He assured me. Okay. How do I do it? All you do is imagine your hands, toes, and human body. Imagine the sensation of standing tall and being human. Okay, I told him. I'm going to step away for 2 seconds to shift myself. To my aching extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He asked me. Okay, I told him. I closed my eyes and began to imagine my human body. 10 fingers wiggled in my mind and 10 toes. I felt the feeling of snow crunching beneath my boots and my hands warming by a fire. I imagined myself high above the ground. Slowly, I felt the strange sensation of bones reorienting themselves and my body seemingly expanding. My body felt a tingly heat spread across it. The sensation was more like a back crack than the scorching heat I had felt before. My legs felt weak, but I found myself otherwise relieved when I opened my eyes. That was until the cold feeling of snow under my toes made me look down and realize a horrifying fact. I was but without clothes. My hands instantly went to cover as much of me as possible. I heard Max approaching and cried out, "No, Max, don't come over here, sweetheart," he gently assured. "My eyes are closed. I've got an oversized tee, shirt and a blanket for you. Promise your eyes are closed." "Yes, Angel." He sounded almost teasing. "My eyes are closed." "Oh, okay. You can come out then." He slowly emerged, eyes assumably tightly closed and a hand over his face. I couldn't help but catch the grin he had as he walked forward. His arm with a free hand was extended with a shirt in it. I snatched it from his grasp, turning my body away from him and throwing it on as quickly as humanly possible. "Okay, Max." I began to turn around. I am. I was cut off as a fluffy blanket was wrapped around me and strong arms lifted me from my feet into them. I gasped and then smiled softly. Strong, warm, and familiar arms. Safety, happiness, and home. "What are you doing?" I laughed, realizing I sounded rather hoarse. "Your entire body is going to be drained for the next few days." He spoke softly, and I would be lying if I didn't admit I selfishly want to hold you in my arms. I whispered in awe. As I looked up into his eyes, I saw a plague of emotion flowing through them. "I thought I lost you, Evelyn." His voice cracked. "I thought I lost the one good." "Max," I hushed, lifting a hand to gently caress his face. "You will never lose me." I leaned my head up, pressing a gentle but tender kiss to his lips. The man might have been a giant. He might have been an alpha. He may have even been someone to be feared. But to me, he was a gentle and strong presence. He was a rock who supported me when I needed it most, protected me when I was scared, and cared for me, even when I didn't need it. He was everything. As I pulled away from the kiss, I saw a gentle grin spread across his face. "What?" I giggled and asked him. "I just love you," he said, gleefully, pressing another gentle kiss to my lips. "And I'm lucky no one else can see your beautiful legs now," he added with a teasing chuckle. I feigned a gasp, lightly hitting his chest. "Maximus Alexander," I teasingly exclaimed. "How on earth did I get stuck with such a mischievous mate?" "I don't know." He shrugged and laughed. "But you're stuck with me." He pecked my lips and leaned his head against mine. "Well, I'm glad to be stuck with you." I smiled, closing my eyes. I felt the gentle sway of walking as he carried me back towards the pack house. The gentle sway made me feel like I was being rocked away and away, far into the land of sleep. I would just allow myself to rest for a few moments. Where the hell is she? A roar sent me bolting upright in bed. I found myself tucked away in bed, clearly by my sweet mate. "What are you talking about?" I heard Maximus scream back. Fran was right. "You have her. You have my sister, you sick bastard." "Where is she?" The voice roared again. My eyes widened as I realized the voice belonged to Arthur Oak. Stumbling out of bed, I stumbled towards the dresser drawers. my body still aching from the day before. I pulled a pair of sweatpants out of the drawer, groaning as I lifted my leg to put it through the hole. As I did so, I glanced up and realized the curtain was cracked open, revealing a pitch black outside. What is going on? Tossing a hand through my hair, I stumbled towards the door. A crashing sound sent me flying from my sleepy state and throwing open the door. Rushing out, I saw my mate and Alpha O crawling around on the floor and attacking each other. What is going on? I exclaimed, rushing towards them. Evelyn, Maximus exclaimed, eyes widening. His focus slipped from the Alpha, allowing Alpha Oak to land a blow to his face. Maximus growled and flipped the Alpha over. Panic took over, my entire being flooded with fear. Stop it, I exclaimed desperately, knowing they could easily kill one another. Instinct took over and I stomped toward them. Stop, I said. Stop, I shouted loudly. A strange baritone rang through my voice, something which spoke of authority and power. Alpha Oak froze, and his head snapped up to look at me. Eyes wide, he released his grip on my mate's collar, pushing him aside, and scrambling up. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His voice was barely above a whisper. I looked to my left and right for who he was referring to. Estelia's, is it really you? His voice shook and tears began to pour down his face. Fear took over as the man who had just fought with my mate stalked toward me. I stepped backward, beginning to shake, and Max swiftly ran over, pushing me behind him. What the hell are you doing? He exclaimed angrily. Get away from my mate. I peeked my head out from Max's arm to look at the Alpha. His gaze was hardened but softened when his eyes met mine. You don't understand. He spoke softly and exasperated lie. He sounded choked up and looked back at my mate. Hey Alpha, Alexander. I am so sorry but don't you smell that? He asked with almost a laugh. Don't you smell that is all over your mate? Confusion and anxiety pricked all over my body. What smell? Maximus paused and glanced down at me, inhaling a deep breath. And then, for the first and possibly last time ever, I heard Maximus audibly inhale quickly and gasp. Oh my goddess, he exclaimed, suddenly frozen and in a strange, almost hallucinogenic state like the other Alpha. What a wrong. I shuddered it. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling fearful and subconscious. Evelyn, I don't know how to say this, Max said softly, eyes gazing towards the floor. Say what? I asked desperately. Say what? I had been through more shock and revelation in the past few months than most people had gone through in a lifetime. I felt confident I could handle whatever he had to say, and yet I was terrified. Their demeanors were terrifying me. Evelyn. Max raised his head to lock eyes with me. Evelyn. Alpha Oak. Eli is your family. He's your brother. Like a deer caught in headlights, I felt my entire body grow rigid and freeze. I don't understand. I shook my head. That's not his, isn't your sister? She's not what? The Alpha's eyes filled with tears, and suddenly I realized how similar they looked to my own. A unique brown which held a golden tint. I felt like a plank had been pulled from beneath my feet and I was thrown into cold water. A splash of ice-cold reality sinking into the bone. He had pale skin. He had a similar hue of brown to my own. His hair color. Even his hair color was similar. The resemblance was uncanny. Too uncanny to be a coincidence. Oh my gosh, I uttered in disbelief, tears following my own eyes. My hand lifted to cover my gaping mouth. I had so many questions, but only one came out. BB, but how? I whispered. Cow, I don't know. I don't know. I thought you were dead. Voice sounding choked. I didn't even recognize you. But when you shifted, your scent, he grew quiet. You can recognize family members by their smell. Maximus whispered, his eyes still wide and in shock. I stared stupefied at the man in front of me, the man who was my brother, and my mind went entirely blank. What does someone say to a person they didn't know existed? To a person who knew you and mourned you and you didn't even know them? I could only think to say one thing. "Hi," I whispered, cracking the tiniest smile while staring at him. "Hi," he cracked a smile in return. He stepped forward slowly before lifting his arms slightly and whispered with a shaky voice, "Can I?" And I nodded, stepping forward, allowing him to hug me. And suddenly, it was like everything clicked. Hugging him was strange, like hugging my father. Warmth flooded my body, as if it recognized him. The kind of warm, protective comfort that only a father or brother could produce. Within seconds, tears were pouring down my face, and I felt his tears hitting my shoulder. The pure emotion of it all setting in. In that moment, I had a brother.